machine has a great selection of stitches to choose from, everything from essential stitches to stretch stitches for stretch fabric, and even decorative stitches for embellishment. So let's see how to select stitches on your machine. To select a stitch, you simply turn the stitch selector dial, and each time you turn it, you can feel it click in place underneath this dot marking on the main part of your machine. But each time I turn the dial, I can see that even though it clicks into place, there are two different stitches that display. So how do you know which one you're going to sew? This is where we use the stitch length dial to determine that. I can see one is gray and one is blue. Let's start with the gray one. So gray lines up with gray. So when I look at my stitch length dial, the numbers are all marked in gray. And 4 is my longest length setting, and I can go all the way down to 0, which is no length at all. So for the gray stitches, you can set your stitch length wherever you want in that gray zone. Because we're set for the multi-stitch zigzag right now, I'm going to set it at a 1. After choosing my stitch length, I'm going to select my stitch width. Let's set it at the widest width, which is a 5, and see how this looks. To the end of your fabric, turn the hand wheel toward you to raise the needle up to its highest position until it just begins to come down, and then raise the presser foot lifter and cut your threads. And there's our multi-step zigzag. This is a great stitch for decorative sewing. You can also use it for elastic insertion. Now let's try that stitch with a new stitch length setting. Let's bring it all the way up to a number 4, which is a very long stitch length setting, and we'll leave the width at 5. When you come to the end of the fabric, turn the hand wheel toward you till the needle is all the way up and just begins to come down. Cut your thread. There you can see the big difference that it makes when you simply change the stitch length. It's the same stitch, but the stitches now are much further apart. Now let's go back to the stitch selector dial and take a look at that honeycomb stitch. When I see that stitch, it's blue. So now I'm going to come up here to my stitch length dial, and I'm going to continue turning until I see this blue S1 appear on the dial. So blue lines up with blue. And these stitches look great when they're set at a stitch width 5. So now let's have a look at our honeycomb stitch. Make sure both threads are underneath the presser foot and up to the back. And step on your foot control to begin sewing. To the end of your fabric, turn the hand wheel toward you so the needle is all the way up, just begins to come down. Raise the lifter and trim your thread. And there's your honeycomb stitch. So we use the multi-step zigzag and honeycomb stitch as an example, but for each pair of stitches on your dial, the same thing is true. Your gray stitches, you would sew somewhere in your gray zone depending on the look you want for your stitch, and your blue stitch would be in the blue zone of your stitch length dial. So adjust your stitch length and stitch width as you wish, and experiment with different threads and different stitches depending on your project. And if you'd like more information, just check out your manual on the Singer website.